Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everybody. Amy Wood and I are going to give you an update on a program that has been at CRL for some time. That is the Jstor Print Journal Archive. CRL's Jstor Print Journal Archive is a collection of print volumes that are meant to match what is in the Jstor Electronic Journals Archive. Jstor collections contain digitized from print back issues of academic journals. Jstor began in 1995 as an experimental digitization project which quickly grew into a library service. To begin, I want to discuss the official Jstor print archives that are located at Harvard University and the University of California. Jstor began to pursue a Jstor print archive in the early 2000s. An early survey by Jstor showed that libraries were deaccessioning and remotely storing paper volumes for Jstor titles in an effort to reclaim space in their libraries. In that survey, respondents suggested the idea of a collaborative retention program for the print volumes as a backup to the electronic. Because of the survey results, Jstor sought community input and formed a paper repository advisory group. The group identified needed characteristics for a paper repository. These included being a dark archive, that is, no access to or circulation of volumes, centralization at one location, being environmentally controlled, including validation at the page level, and having an acceptable price tag for stakeholders. In late 2004, Jstor signed agreements with both Harvard University and the University of California Digital Library to archive all Jstor print titles publicly released through October 2003. This was initially 353 titles. Jstor identified several roles for a Jstor paper archive within their organization, particularly for journal literature. First was preservation of the original format and context of the content. Perhaps in a future format migration project, knowing the format and context would be helpful. Second was disaster recovery. Should all digital content fail, there would be a print backup. And third was a mixture of factors, including being aesthetically or historically valuable, having some rarity, marginalia, or some libraries' missions included requiring an archive of the print materials. The print archive Jstor created provided a secure backup for the Jstor database, and they continue to grow it today. The Harvard Print Archive contains almost all of the original print volumes that Jstor digitized from. That is, Harvard is in many cases storing the exact volumes that were digitized by Jstor. Harvard's is a dark archive, meaning it does not circulate, but resides in a controlled storage environment with limited access. Harvard's archive is owned by Jstor, while California's is owned by the university. Both Harvard and the UCs are responsible for monitoring and reporting on their collections. The cost of the archives are shared between Jstor and the institution housing the archive. Harvard's collection is the most complete. The UC's collection is compiled from the collections of various UC campus libraries. It has gaps and missing titles. Harvard's archive are validated to the page level because it is in fact the same pages as those that were digitized. Those from the UCs were page validated for a time, but Jstor, who funded the validation, decided not to continue funding for their second DIM archive. Jstor has audited both of these repositories, and the UC audit reports are published on the UC's website. The UC Jstor print archive resides at one of the University of California's northern or southern regional library facilities. These facilities are secure and environmentally controlled. Over the years, other print archive programs for Jstor have come and gone. FLAIR, a print archive for Florida academic libraries, has a print archive for Jstor. Many other shared print programs have Jstor titles in their collection. Jstor's business model has expanded considerably since 2000. Content now includes academic monographs, research reports from trusted institutes, and primary sources. Also important to note is that Jstor's journal collections continue to expand. Serials continue to be digitized in phases or subject-related collections. In 2014, Jstor announced its final Arts and Sciences collection, Arts and Sciences 15. The Arts and Sciences collections contain works from 60 disciplines. There are currently 2,760 titles across all the Jstor collections. This is in contrast to the original 353 titles that were collected in 2004. As you will note from the slide, CRL has continually seen growth in the number of target titles for our archive. Our numbers are different than those of Jstor because we count title changes, not journal families. CRL's Jstor print archive was started in 2002. The collection is comprised of volumes deposited by our members. Members who are weeding their collections check our online catalog, look for titles that match issues that they are discarding. They then send a list of these titles to us, and we let them know which titles we want. There is a discrepancy between what is listed in the catalog and what is needed because there is a lag time between what is offered, sent, and then processed. CRL takes in approximately 7,000 Jstor volumes a year. The volumes deposited at CRL, like all CRL deposits, become CRL's property. CRL validates our collection to the issue level. This means we perform an issue-by-issue review of the materials deposited with us. We look at overall condition and completeness of the issues. We make repairs or seek replacements as necessary for missing or damaged materials. Original copies are always preferred, but reprints are acceptable when that's all we can get. We do not take microfilm as part of the archive. CRL maintains the Jstor collection in our secure facility. We are closed to all but CRL staff, except when we have tours, usually when ALA is in Chicago. Access to the CRL copies is limited to those who can demonstrate a need for the print instead of the electronic. During the time the program has existed, there has been only one circulation of the print. It was a scholar who wanted to see an image from an art journal. CRL's Jstor print archive began with a goal of 96 titles in 2002. Today, of those 96 titles, 77 have gaps and need holdings, while 19 titles are complete. Of those that are incomplete, 4 titles are actually complete but have condition issues within the volumes severe enough to require replacement. CRL has close to 3,400 journal titles listed in our catalog. Of these Jstor titles, we currently have 546 that are complete. We also have 979 titles with no holdings in our Jstor collection. There are several reasons CRL is not able to complete its Jstor collections. Firstly, relying on deposits is not the best way to assemble a complete journal collection. Intentionally seeking out titles and holdings for the Jstor collection would make more sense. We receive what others are discarding. This means we often aren't offered complete runs, and many libraries tend to get more recent issues or journals that are popular with their faculty, even if they are only one of 3 libraries in North America with holdings for that title. Also a problem is that although Jstor has stopped adding to arts and sciences, it continues to add to other collections in single discipline areas. Collections like Business 1 through 4 and Language and Literature continue to grow. Some of the titles included in these collections are also in the Arts and Sciences collection, while others are new. CRL's Jstor collection has approximately 47,000 volumes, using about 12,000 linear feet in the CRL stacks. To complete the collection, we might need an additional 12,000 linear feet, occupying a significant amount of CRL's open shelf space. CRL has a total of 337,752 linear feet in our building. Much of it is occupied. And don't forget, the Jstor journal collection continues to grow. Before I pass the baton over to Amy, I want to remind everyone of the Portico digital repository. Portico is a factor in what we are discussing today because Portico includes preservation for titles selected for Jstor. Portico is an important part of Jstor's preservation planning. And now, over to Amy for some interesting numbers and a chance to ponder other Jstor print preservation work.
Thanks, Marie. The next few slides highlight in a more granular way some of the information Marie presented. CRL is committed to supporting a data-driven approach to collection development and management. CRL's Jstor collection focuses on the Jstor Arts and Sciences collection, but it does include a few hundred titles outside of the arts and sciences. CRL has roughly 57% of the titles of the overall Jstor digital corpus and 65% of the arts and sciences. The arts and sciences make up about 79% of the overall Jstor digital corpus. To understand the state of preservation of print copies of the Jstor corpus, CRL compared its holdings with those of the Harvard Jstor Archive, the University of California Jstor Archive, and FLAIR, a statewide shared collection of low-use print materials from academic libraries in Florida. These archives all play an important part in the preservation of Jstor journals, but as Marie pointed out, they have different operating and organizational designs that affect the comprehensiveness of the individual collections. One can think of it as a continuum from incidental, where Jstor titles happen to be included in shared print programs because of their proximity, subject matter, or publisher fits the shared print collection scope, through invitational, such as CRL, where we publicize the scope and invite libraries to help build the collection through deposits, to the intentional, such as Harvard, where there is an active effort to acquire Jstor titles to build a comprehensive print archive. The intentional requires the most resources, but it becomes the foundation that enables other libraries or programs to take either a less resource-intensive approach to building their archive or to target their resources where they're most needed. This chart illustrates the relationship of the size and completeness within these three types. CRL's comparison of the four archives, the Harvard, UC, CRL, and FLAIR, shows that 97% of the Jstor serial titles are archived in print. And of those 143 that are not archived, about half of those are in the arts and sciences. Although 97% of the titles are included in print archives, about 27% are only in one archive. And even intentional archives like Harvard are not without gaps, so it is very important to ensure we identify the gaps and ensure those volumes are preserved in another archive or can be found to help complete an incomplete run. Of the 143 titles most at risk, those that are not in an archive, the number of copies reported in OCLC's WorldCat ranges from 1 to 305, but half have fewer than 29 copies reported. We don't yet have benchmarks for the rate at which these titles disappear from library collections. How few copies do we need before a title is put on an endangered list is an important question to answer. CRL is currently spearheading a project to reduce the duplication of Jstor records in OCLC's WorldCat so that we have a better idea of what those endangered titles might be. The results of a broad search of all Jstor records indicated that there were about 20 times the number of records needed. As we have begun to identify the duplicates and request the merger of records, we have found between 5 and 19 extra records per title per format. And although we have just started this effort a couple of months ago, we have already had 2 catalogers from other institutions join the effort. So we look forward to more involvement from the community. Finally, Metadata Matters. A single accurate bibliographic record per title with attached holdings in a shared database is the best tool to identify and track endangered titles and to ensure the preservation of print copies. So now, I'll be glad to take your questions.
Thank you, Amy and Marie. For those who are tuning in from abroad, we're sorry for a little bit of the jumpiness of our presentation. One of our visual panels here where we could see the questions and answers went blank on us. So we're scrambling around a little bit with our computers, but hopefully everything has been smooth for you. So we're going to gladly take questions from the audience. And there have been a couple that have come in, so and hopefully we'll be able to answer these. So one of the presenters, one of the panelists here suggested that had some questions about the Harvard archive, and the question was, can we do we know, is Harvard still actively archiving Jstor materials intentionally? And is this still an active program? Marie, do you know the answer to that?
Yes, I can answer that with a resounding yes. They continue to grow the collection. It is always a little bit behind what has been digitized in Jstor because it takes them some time to add to the collection. But if you go to the paper database, you'll see we do provide access to the data about the Harvard collection in paper. And so you can see there what titles have been archived. I don't know how often that information is updated, however. Amy?
Harvard supplies CRL with metadata from their archive collection on a quarterly basis. So January, April, July, and October, we receive all of the updates that have been made to that collection.
Amy, I know this might be a question for you or Marie. One of our participants asked, of the 143 unarchived titles, are there any common characteristics? What do we know about those titles, or why?
Well, we do know that they're all held by North American libraries. So they are either in libraries in either Canada or the US. We know that half of them are in the Arts and Sciences collection, but that's about as far as our look into those titles has gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should mention to those that our study is still underway for some of that data, so that we're continuing to refine the information that we know. There was a question related to, I think, the completeness of holdings of all of those. Has that been a part of the study that CRL's undertaken to date? That is the comprehensiveness of the titles. We've been talking about some of the at the title level, but have we been able to dig into the comprehensiveness of, say, the Harvard archive?
We have looked at the volume and issue level data in the Harvard archive. Some of the expression of the metadata makes it a little difficult to clearly identify gaps. The supplements are not always identified in a consistent way, and compound volumes such as the 14/15 type is usually just marked with the early volume, so the 14. So that makes it a little difficult. We have identified titles, though, where there are some gaps, but very, very few. It's a very comprehensive collection. But those, the titles that we looked at that Harvard had gaps in, CRL had the gaps, or had the volumes that were the gaps in the Harvard collection.
Great, thank you. A bunch more questions are coming in here, and our screen is not necessarily keeping pace with those. So let me pan through this other list that I have. Not sure if we addressed this question or not already. I apologize. Are there any intentional plans to source the 143 endangered titles?
That we don't have any intentional plans at this point, but we think it would be a really good idea if at least somebody would start to think about this. That's why we're digging into this information at this time. We wonder if the community would think that was a good idea.
Here's a question about some more information about the list of Jstor titles. Is there a live list of Jstor titles, and how is that shared?
When CRL starts its collection comparison, we always use the list of titles that Jstor has on its collection of what's in their digital collection. So we start there. There are some titles in there that are only available in digital form. They were born digital, but that's always our starting point. We do update the CRL's paper database with all of the holdings from all of these collections that we've mentioned: the Flair, UC, Harvard, and CRL. So you could either be Jstor collection or CRL's paper database.
We have a question. I'm not quite sure how to interpret this question, but let me give it a shot. The question was, why is the archive dark rather than light? I don't know whether that archive you were referring to meant the CRL archive or perhaps the Harvard archive, but maybe we can just address the CRL side of things.
Yeah, so the CRL archive is not dark. The CRL archive is available to those who can show us a reason why they might need the print over the digital surrogate. The Harvard archive is dark because basically it's only being created for the Jstor, for possible Jstor reformatting, et cetera. So it really is Jstor's collection at Harvard, although it's debatable whether or not that can be included as something that the community wants to rely upon as another copy of Jstor.
So a couple of questions, I think, driving to the heart of the discussion is, so does CRL still want to collect Jstor titles, or is the lack of space and the challenges that we are mentioning here arguing for a different approach? Maybe I can just address this broadly, since this is a conversation that's come up with our Collections and Services Policy Committee, in that we are indeed taking a look at all of the various options in front of us. CRL does continue right now to collect Jstor titles on deposit from its member institutions. But as we start to look at this data and we look at some of the challenge points, such as that which Marie and Amy have pointed out, we wonder whether we should be building a broader national or international strategy, North American strategy, towards smarter collecting of these materials. Does CRL necessarily need to be redundant if it's being held in the intentional archives, such as Amy described? Or should we be pursuing those more endangered titles, the titles that are not currently in an intentional archive, and those that may be, moreover, lesser held among member institutions or other libraries in North America? I think we're looking for your best and brightest ideas along this. The CRL Jstor archive has continued unimpeded for 17 years, and we're now starting to see what the potential implications for space and usability of CRL's building are. Let me just scroll down and pick up a couple extra questions here. There's a couple of, oh, yes, so some validation, I think, from among the members when we were suggesting might CRL take the approach of reaching out for the endangered titles. And I see two responses to that, suggesting that this would be a great service to libraries to have CRL coordinate the sourcing and perhaps being more intentional in targeting those particular activities. And another commenter suggested that this type of activity should be communicated widely among the members. That is to say that a communication plan and an action agenda should be built around this and surveyed more widely beyond just today's event. And that is certainly our intention as well. This is just what I would consider the first step in a multi-layered conversation around the future of Jstor print archives. And I believe, Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, that we intend to bring this up as well at ALA Midwinter at the PAN Forum?
Yes.
So what we're looking to do, I think, in the immediate next steps are to publish some of this data on CRL's website and to circulate this around to the interested member institutions and to start to build the conversation around these activities so that we can continue to refine and improve our program. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Amy and Marie. I appreciate you bringing this important issue to the fore.